33. Welcome back, everyone. At long last, you are listening to Real 33. I am Rick Haney, joined by Brandon Shaw. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Rick.
We got some special stuff lined up today.
We do indeed. We have our special guest. Let's make a round of applause for Mr. William Allen, also known as Cru Jones. Hello, Bill. How you doing?
And never better, frankly. Good to be here.
Man, I'm so glad to be talking to you guys. It's just so gloomy lately, and I just need to pick me up. So thank you guys for joining me.
Well, it's so gloomy. I've been in Texas.
Yeah.
I live in Texas. Hell, of course I've been here, but crazy week.
Well, this is a special show. I'm excited about this one because we're going to be talking about my rad career, and there's a couple of questions that I have. I'm sure, Brandon, you have a lot of questions.
Yeah, when you haven't read the book, you have to ask lots of questions. That's the best way. It's like I'm using the Cliff Notes called Bill Notes today.
Bill Notes?
Bill Notes, yeah.
Well, my first question is, Bill, this is a project that has been a long time in the making. You know, what was it that kind of pushed you in the direction of writing it to begin with?
That would be my wife, Carol. She's like, you got to do something, dude. So literally, it pays to have a pushy wife. And I'm a collector of stories. And so I thought, well, I don't have enough to write an entire book about Rad, which is my fan base, basically, but I have enough to talk about my ins and outs in show business, how I got started, what happened before, during, and after that period. So that's kind of how I started. And it went very well. And I recently came out with a second edition with added material, and it's an Amazon bestseller. So you can add bestseller to my list of something I wish I did better.
Well, I read it and I loved it. And you touched upon the beginnings, you know, your acting career. And was it a long lost cousin of your mom's cousin or somebody who was a movie producer, and that was like your first introduction into acting?
That's right. That's right. There was a gentleman named Ted Coons who I had never met. He was my mom's second cousin, I believe, and he started a film company in Texas in the early 80s. And that's how I got my first starring role or role of any kind on a movie. And the plot line was reminiscent of Rad, an athlete who wins the big race and gets the girl, etc. But it was in the horse racing world. And so I was on location in Lexington, Kentucky for 6 months. And that's an awful long time for a film shoot. Certainly for somebody whose first experience away from home was like a different universe. It was populated by real film professionals and novices and headed up by a true madman. So he was spending this bank president's stolen money. That guy ended up in jail at the end of the shoot after they figured out where the funds came from. But it was just madness. But it got me and a young George Clooney our first jobs in show business. And I got to work with an Oscar winner, Jose Ferrer, who was one of the lions of both Broadway and film long before I came along. So it was a great entree into show business. And it got me a SAG card, got me a few dollars, got me an agent in Hollywood. And so that's how I ended up in Hollywood eventually.
And Bill, was there a casting couch, and are you also part of the Me Too movement?
Many casting couches. I saw them and sat on them. That's all I can say. It didn't sit on anybody, but yeah. Man, I never actually saw any weirdness like that, to tell you the truth. And so I know it goes on, but I was never privy to it.
But you would have been open to it.
Well, listen, I was open to a lot of stuff, so to speak. And I did a lot of wild stuff, but it was all off the set. You know, I tried to separate the two and keep things professional. I dated people, co-stars, Lori Loughlin for 30 minutes. But, you know,
Till Martin swooped in.
that's right. But generally, I tried to keep things separated that way, and that served me well, I guess. You know, plus I was pretty boring.
You mentioned your early beginnings with George Clooney. There were several of you, and this is where I need some clarification. Was it this production that there was like a gang of future celebrities kind of hanging out on this set that were responsible for a lot of different hijinks? In
You
particular,
could
one
say
that
that.
played on the
Yeah.
producer.
Yeah. So there was a group of us. Probably the ringleader was Miguel Ferrer, who had a role in the movie recently passed, maybe 3-4 years ago. And I think he was on NCIS doing that when he passed away. Anyway, he's the one that got George to come down. Cousin George lived in Cincinnati, an hour and a half north. And he just called him up, said, "We're doing a film. Get your butt down here." So George hightailed it down to Lexington, Kentucky. We were there for 6 months. And I think he referenced, it wasn't a producer we pulled this prank on, but one of the actors, and he was also a crew person also. Is this the practical joke you're referring to?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, around the piano.
yeah. So George started pretending to be very ill every time we would be around this one crew member, Tom, and acting like he was very sick and going into the hospital. He put ashes under his eyes to make him look like death on toast. And so, oh my God, we've now got a cat fight in my living room. This is awesome.
You live in a zoo?
Yeah, actually, I do. Hold on, guys. George is running around acting like he's very ill every time he sees Tom. He's coughing, says he's going to go to the hospital. And we're like, "Tom, we may never see George again. This is serious." It was horrible what we were doing to Tom. Really scared him. And so we decided to have a going away party for George downstairs at the Marriott piano bar. And my friend's playing piano, Mr. Lapels, and the entire cast and crew, I think, is down there because everybody's heard about what's going on and they want to see Tom's reaction when the reveal happens. So anyway, we're all taking pictures with George and saying, "Oh, it's like your last chance to say goodbye to George." And it's very emotional for poor Tom. So at an opportune moment, George slips around the corner, puts a cherry stone oyster soaked in ketchup in his mouth, and comes and sits beside Tom. Yeah. And kind of just starts choking and coughs it up right on that plexiglass, right in Tom's face. So it looked like a piece of bloody lung. And it was shocking. And the place exploded with laughter and flash bulbs. And nonetheless, Tom was just fixated on this piece of lung that he was looking at. So yeah, this is one of many insane kind of pranks that we did. It's just these guys were on fire, and extremely funny and kind of ahead of the curve as far as what was going on in Lexington for sure at the time. So yeah, we had a lot of fun.
They were the Danger Boys.
We were the Danger Boys.
Correct.
And as I point
Aptly
out,
titled.
that's what we dubbed ourselves. And we were actually kind of dangerous on a kind of personal safety level. We were practicing unsafe practices off the set, including the last couple of weeks of filming. I'm on a trampoline with cousin George, and we're bouncing up and down, two guys on a trampoline. Who does that? And I just destroy my ankle. I sprain it. It looks like a purple cantaloupe. It's that big. You could hear it just kind of.
Wow.
You could hear it snap. And so I had to do another couple of weeks of shooting on that. That was fun. But yeah, you try to learn to be careful when you're not on the set, because you can grind a movie to a halt for something stupid like that, and I did.
So you hadn't wrapped yet. You were close to finishing filming, or was
Close to
that right in the
finishing,
middle of it?
yeah, and so I suffered through it, and then we got shut down the last week of filming anyway because funds ran out, and it was after that that we found out the producer was a crooked bank president making bogus loans from his own bank and putting it straight into the film company's coffers,
Oh,
which is
wow.
how I would have done it if I was going to embezzle funds. And I'm a high school dropout.
Yeah,
This guy's a bank president. He wasn't very elegant
he was
at
onto
all.
something.
He was not,
Yeah.
and they caught him red-handed in about 12 seconds, and ended up in jail. Henry Fagan was his name, and after he got out of jail, I understood he carried around cassette copies of that movie and they're off, thinking it was some lost gem. It was not, and yeah, trying to get it sold. So it had a very sad ending, and I was sad that it never got released until I saw it, and it was just a hideous
Yeah.
mess. To see yourself.
I mean, so it's out there.
No, it's nowhere. It's nowhere.
Oh,
I
okay.
might have. I
Okay.
talked about it with my brother. I might have some scenes of it in my garage on VHS, but it's literally the worst movie ever made. And to see yourself in the worst movie ever made is this, focus. It's just heinous, but fun.
It's a stepping stone.
Got me out here, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
So was this the film about the jockey, or that's what we're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
the horse
Okay.
racing movie. Yeah. So I got to meet 3 Triple Crown winners: Seattle Slew, Secretariat, and Affirmed. I stood right next to him, and so I was introduced to the world of thoroughbred racing, which is very intoxicating and in more ways than one. And it's just a whole world that I became introduced to and loved, and got to be a pretty good rider. The guy who trained me was Bill Hartack, who won 5 derbies. So yeah, I got to work at a pretty high level with these guys. It was great.
Just reading through some of those stories, for anybody who's just kind of tacking on here, we were talking about George Clooney, who to this day is a very well-known prankster to a lot of his co-stars and certainly friends and family. And that's pretty much where it all began, was with you on that set.
Man, I got to say that's where everybody, kind of honed their skills as creating extreme mayhem on set, and it makes the time go. It
Yeah.
keeps it light, and it becomes really more important than the filmmaking very quickly.
Mhm.
You hatch these plans, and when they come off beautifully like that, yeah, it can become legendary. I'm still talking about it 40 years later.
Right. So you wrap up this film. Is that when you decided that you wanted to move to California and be an actor?
Yeah, like I said, I moved back to Texas for a couple of years before I got gumption enough to make the full transition. But at that time, I ended up working in Arlington, doing acting classes, founding this acting studio with Adam and my brother Sherman. And one of the very, very first students was a young guy out of UT Arlington, Lou Diamond Phillips, who was just a college theater actor at the time, and he soon just blossomed in front of everybody's eyes. So that was exciting to see. And before long, we were both out in Hollywood, and he was doing La Bamba, and I was doing film and TV. So it was great to just reconnect, and we work together to this day.
Yeah, that's great. You guys play music together.
Yes, we do. We toured as a rock band for 5-6 years off and on. We played a lot of the 50 or lower 48 states rather, and including Farm Aid, and we did a stadium run with Billy Ray Cyrus. So we had way too much fun.
This was the Pipe Fitters?
The Pipe Fitters with Lou Diamond Phillips. And we'd get on a tour bus and hit mostly southern states, but we played the north and northeast also. So we just we had a great time, and it became a really great band, certainly by the end. And our bass player, singer, went on to be a major force in Nashville. Chris Lindsey, he's a hit writer for people
Oh, cool.
and producer for people like Taylor Swift and Kenny and who's that goofball, Blake Shelton. So he's out there swinging for the fences. So that's part of my thing. And we're
For
hoping.
those that attended the, I'm sorry not to interrupt, but for those that attended Hell Track 2018, they got to see the Pipefitters in person play.
That's right. And Chris performed some of his big country hits like Amazed, which is kind of an anthem now, I guess, in the country music world. And we got to kind of kick the cobwebs off, and hopefully we're going to be in the studio by the end of this year.
Sounds like your backup singers have already arrived.
That's right.
Was there ever a point where you were, so obviously you were really into acting, but you were also really into music. Was there ever a point where you were debating on which path you wanted to take?
No, I just kind of did and do what's in front of me. I come from a musical background, so to speak, in that I was a huge music fan in Dallas growing up. We had Stevie Ray Vaughan and the Fabulous Thunderbirds and Johnny Winter. These were the local bands that you could go see any night of the week. So I came out here and got hired in a play by John Lee Hancock. He's got a movie now called The Little Things with Denzel. We were in a theater company together, and he wrote a play about a band, a blues band, starring my brother and myself, and Brandon Lee was in that also. So we formed a band for that play, and after the play closed, the band stayed together and ended up with Lou in the lineup, and it became a real entity. It's kind of an interesting story. So I had to learn to play this instrument for the play, and then got serious with it, and it's continued to be a big part of my life.
You can tell Bill's music style, Rick, by the fact he left Vanilla Ice out of that little list of people from Dallas, Texas. That were in the music world.
Influence on me. Yeah. I mean, who isn't? It's like the beat.
I don't know if Rick knew that Vanilla Ice was from Dallas, but yes, he said
I'm speechless. I have no idea what to say right now. Talk about being thrown.
Here's what's good. I mean,
so the Dallas has always been a very big music scene, blues in particular. Austin, Dallas is famous for the great musicians that just, I don't know, it's something in the water. And the people that I hung out with tended to be guitar slingers. So I didn't pick up guitar till a lot later. And now that's what I do all day, is try to play chords. It's a pain in the butt.
When did you learn to play the harmonica?
Like I said, for this play, it was in the early 90s. It was for a band called the Pipefitters in the play. So that was it. You can play a few notes and kind of get by on a harmonica, but if you're going to get serious and sound good, you have to take lessons or have a really great ear. And I kind of did both. And so it became a vocation pretty quickly. And once I started touring with these guys, I figured, well, since I'm getting paid for this, I might as well get better at it. So I kind of concentrated on it for a while.
Bill, I want to apologize once again when I said you played the kazoo. It was just a simple mistake.
We like to call it the misery whistle.
The misery whistle?
Yeah. Not a lot of call for it, but when it's placed in the right song at the right time, it can add a lot.
It's the instrument that made Ringo Starr famous.
Did not know that.
That song, You're 16, has a kazoo solo.
There's also Blues Traveler.
Remember that song?
Oh, well, of course. I forgot about the kazoo solo. Again, I jumped back to Misery Whistle.
I'm sorry. I meant to say he made the Misery Whistle famous.
Thank you.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah. So let's hit rewind for a second. Did you start the stage acting in the early 80s, or did that come later?
Oh, I did some plays in junior high and high school, I guess. And I really didn't do much theater until I moved to Los Angeles. and
I see.
was lucky enough to found a theater company, like I said, with John Lee Hancock and
Yeah.
Brandon Lee, who became my closest and dearest friend until his passing. So it was a seminal time in my life, and it spawned a lot of great talent. A lot of great talent.
Was it I'm just trying to figure out how and when you ended up working in television, because that's really what kind of pushed you toward being in Rad.
Yeah. Well, as soon as I moved out to Los Angeles, as I said earlier, I had an agent. So I soon started going out and booking gigs, which was a shock to me. I guess you're in with the right people and have a certain amount of talent. It's not a mystery, you know. I just started booking gigs, and before you know it, Hal Needham saw me on a TV show I did. The first TV show I did.
Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, I think it was in reruns by the time he saw it, but he did, and that's why he brought me in for the role of Cru. And he had me sit on a mongoose bicycle, as I recall, and do a scene, say a few lines. Lines weren't that complicated, and probably 6 weeks later, we were filming in Calgary.
So,
Bill, in the book,
so,
did you have red hair?
Did
you?
I?
Yeah, in the book it says you had red hair.
I kind of have reddish hair at certain times of the year. At that point, they had me dye my hair black to match Ed's. This is true because there was so much close up stunt double work. You can't really dye a dark haired guy's hair red. It looks stupid. So they're like, well, let's just dye Bill's hair black. And we did. And it looked fine. I mean, it looks goofy now, but at the time it wasn't shocking to anybody.
For those that are following along with the book, of course, I'm talking about chapter 12, page 76, first paragraph. Sure Bill knew that.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any questions about the photos, Brandon? Because that seems to be.
Actually, you did your books kind of fast. I'm reading stuff. I thought I knew everything about you, but I didn't know you had red hair.
Oh.
See, I got something from this already. The photos are good. A lot of photos, a lot of male photos. And Lori, here's Lori got Jose doing the backflip, of course. You and Bart buddying up there.
Yep.
Bart and me, it says.
We were very friendly on set.
Nice candidates.
He was great to hang out with. So were the twins. Everybody was great. Jamie, Lori, Hal was a hoot. You know, the writers and producers were young, so I got to hang with them. Sam, he's still a friend. So
I think the picture of George Clooney is awesome because I've seen that picture and I never read below to know that was George Clooney.
That's George.
It does not look like him.
Yeah, well, he was. We were both young bucks at the time, but I believe that was taken at Lou's house up there on Outpost. So it's a pretty famous neighborhood out there.
So you're hired for the lead role in this new BMX movie, and you're on set with all these professional stunt guys, professional bike riders. What was your relationship like with, for example, Eddie and Martin and some of the other guys that, you know, when everybody culminated at the end at Hell Track? What was it like being on set knowing that you were playing one of these guys? Because you didn't have a history in BMX, correct?
Not hardly. I didn't have a history of being on any two wheels, really. So, and that's easy to see when you see me on a bicycle in that movie. But I don't remember mingling with those guys too much. I mean, I was and am to this day kind of intimidated by their talent, you know, and it was even more jaw-dropping back in the day because I hadn't been exposed to that kind of athleticism on a bicycle. And so I mostly hung out with the actors, Marta, Jamie, Lori, when she deemed me, worthy. But I don't think I hung out with the writers as much as the stunt coordinators and the actors.
Now, when you say when she deemed you worthy, was there any type of initial Was there any type of initial friction between you two, or was
Friction, it was fire, baby. Fire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
friction causes fire.
that's right. It was the right kind of friction, but sadly, I was not as sophisticated as maybe Brandon Shaw, and I ruined that first date. It's probably, I guess you would term it a date mare, as they call it now, and correctly so. Yeah, I got just completely drunk, just out of my mind drunk. I don't remember being that drunk in a long time. And yeah, it went downhill from there. And then I proposed to her that night. So,
Hold on, you proposed to who?
I can't blame you.
huh?
Carol? You
That
say you
was
proposed to
a
Lori or
decade
Carol?
later or so. But yeah, to a young Lori Loughlin on the set of that movie, or an after hours situation. Yes, it's true. And it's also true that she laughed in my face and slammed the door. So, all these
Bill,
things.
is in your book? Does it talk about? I'm sorry to interrupt, but in your book, does it talk about your getting proposed to by your wife? Is that somewhere in your book?
It's gotta be. Yeah. So that's kind of a cute story. We were in New York seeing our buddy Lou in The King and I, which was a once in a lifetime experience. And so we went to dinner in Chinatown, and we're with a friend of hers, and she goes to the bathroom, and it's the end of a meal, and I pick up the fortune cookie and open it, and it says at the "Will you marry me, sweet William?" And Wedding Bell Blues comes over the intercom. Bill, I love you so. I always will. And this is happening. And I look up, and the entire restaurant is looking at me, and the women in the restaurant are crying. And it took me a second to figure out what was going on. I was in shock. And of course, I accepted. I felt I was under duress, like I was being waterboarded. But because I was with tears, really. But yeah, we've been happily married now for an insane amount of years. Yeah, like 20.
And I noticed you did dedicate the book to Carol.
She deserves it, dude. Yeah, she deserves all credit. We're a great team, and anybody that knows Carol knows she's one of the good ones. She's out there trying to make this world a better place.
No, she is super supportive of everything you do involving rad and BMX in your career. I'll give her that much. She's really, really probably your biggest fan.
Let's hope so.
And if you didn't put this in the book, you need to add the whole Blockbuster story to your book in your next, if you do a rewrite, where she rented your movie. She actually told me the story. She went and rented Rad to see what you're about.
Okay.
Like after your first date.
I don't know this
Like I
story.
said, talk to her about it. Get to know your wife.
Why don't you tell us right now, since you brought it up? How did she like it?
Well, y'all met. She knew you're an actor.
You're right.
And she'd never seen your work, of course. So she went down to Blockbuster and rented your video, Rad, and watched it I believe after your first date, if I'm not mistaken. And, she said she enjoyed it, said she liked it. And, yeah, I thought you knew this.
I actually did.
Yeah, it's a really good story, man. It's really awesome.
So I passed the test.
We need to bring her on one. We'll bring her on one day and actually let her tell, because it's really cool to hear her, talk about it and stuff.
All right.
Wow. Hey, what's Blockbuster?
It's a B&B in Oregon now. That's what it is.
Oh, okay, cool.
You know what? Me and Bill called Blockbuster in Oregon to see if they had Rad available, and the lady pulled it up. Remember this, Bill? The girl pulled it up and said, "No, someone rented it a while back, and they never brought it back," which is kind of a common trend with Rad. Yeah, I was there in March.
It's been rented since 1988. We haven't seen it since.
All right, let's go. I'm going to get through the rest. Now, you have this book on audio. Of course, if you're just tuning in, it's My Rad Career. I mean, we're on a podcast, but My Rad Career. Where would you pick this book up at, Bill?
You can pick it up at barnesandnoble.com. You can pick it up at myradcareer.com. And you can pick up the audio version on Audible.
Okay. I want to tell you something. I've heard your stories about fans and signing weird body parts, but you will find a picture that proves this to be true in the book. You're signing, it looks like a girl's belly or something.
No, it's not her belly. It is her backside, actually. At the 25th anniversary in Calgary. That's it. That's it.
That's her front side, not backside.
It's her bottom, let's say. And
okay, it is more of her hip, but yeah, she's got a turn on an angle.
There was an autograph line, and she gets to the head of it and drops trowel and sticks her butt, just not in my face, but where I could clearly see what was going on. And yeah, she had got this rad tattoo, and she had me sign it. And so in the book, it asks, what is my favorite piece of rad fan art, or as I call it, fart. And obviously I put Jen Chang's butt in there because it's fart.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Bill, in this book,
the things you learn here at Real 33.
You reference some people from the film days. Have you had anybody come at you and say, why did you put that in the book since this was released?
Why did I put what in the book?
No, I've said, have you had anyone come at you and ask you why you put that content in the book? Maybe something that they didn't want to share? Because there is a lot of talk about different actors.
So far, I have heard from no one's lawyers, but I can tell you there's a couple of just paragraphs I took out of the first edition that I thought, not that it was, actionable, but I just felt uncomfortable. But in exchange, I put in a really great, lengthy, hysterical story about Brandon when he came to Ennis, Texas for our annual Wang Dang Doodle, an excuse for a bunch of rednecks to get drunk at my buddy's farm. And Brandon showed up with a trunk load of mushrooms and doled them out to everybody. And it became insane. It was like an open range lunatic asylum. And so that story is in the book, and I'm pretty proud of it because it's all true. We survived it.
Bill, I couldn't help but notice a lot of actors don't talk about their height when they're more on the shorter side, but you put it all out there. It's kind of a tell-all book. You remember that in chapter 7. It tells your height, 5'8".
That's a lot.
And you're very public about it.
I said 5'8".
How tall are you really? 5'7"?
I'm 5'7".
5'8".
Whatever. I can tell you.
How tall are you?
I think I'm 5'7", dude. So I take that back.
Yeah, for those that are following along with their book, it's page 26 right toward the middle, chapter 7.
He's never read the book, and all of a sudden he's
I'm like Dennis Rodman. I was misquoted in my own book.
Or you said it. You said 5'8" to add a little inch. I mean, you're adding a little inch there.
I didn't say that. I might have written it.
You and Tom Cruise.
Didn't say it. I was going to say Tom Cruise is my exact height, dude. Exact. We're eye to eye. So it's not short. It's compact.
I want to say that you do address the promotional tour of RAD, and you talk about that, of course, chapter 8. And could you tell us a little bit more about that? What you put in the book about the tour?
Yeah, it was really cool. We got a wrapped minivan at the time and dragged a quarter pipe behind that thing, and myself, Rich Segur, and Flying Brian Blyther did a tour mostly of the East and Northeast. We did some TV, did a lot of shopping malls, did some children's hospitals, and I really got to know those guys. And again, we just had way too much fun and ended up in New York City. And I blew off the premiere of RAD because I was having too much fun with those guys. It was just,
Was that just part of, it's not in the book, was that just part of the job, or did they pay you extra for that?
That's part of the job. That's considered part of the deal, is you do publicity for the movie. Yeah.
For those that are part of the RAD Army, that picture of that van, I believe Gork or someone popped it up on the internet a while back. So it was at some BMX track, and there was the RAD van.
Oh, is that
kind
right?
of a cool picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really.
They had some RAD tour jackets made up for the.
I've seen pictures of those, of course.
Yeah, I think it was on a TV show recently. Somebody came across one of those in a garage find or something like that. But that's pretty much the only swag associated with it at the time, except for the Vans shoes.
Bill, is there anything in the book that you wish you wouldn't have put in there? You have regrets about?
Well, like I said, yeah, there's a couple of things in the first edition that didn't make the second edition that were frankly just kind of a little just embarrassing, a little salacious.
Can we talk about that, please? Which chapter?
We can,
Well, if we have John,
you figure it out.
What's it again?
if we have John Farnham on, you're going to have to write him an apology.
I will, dude. You know this. Somebody loosely connected to him or closely connected to him said, "Hey, I can get him on the podcast. I'll let him read your book." And I'm like, "Don't let him read the book. Don't let him read the book, please." At the end, somebody asked in the fan Q&A about the soundtrack. Do you like the soundtrack? And I'm like, no, actually. I say, if I was stuck on a desert island with only that soundtrack, I would swim back to civilization, kill John Farnham, and then swim back to the desert island. So, all in good fun. It just, if that song, Thundering in Your Heart, gets stuck in your head, abandon all hope because it's going to be there for hours. And it happens to anybody, whether you like the song or not.
There's no escape.
It's very hooky.
Yeah.
Very hooky, which for a songwriter, that's what you want. But for somebody who's not a particular fan of that song, and that gets caught in your head, you're getting the ice pick out and stabbing your ear, which is happening.
Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in chapter 9, you mentioned Matthew Broderick. Have you ever been people mistaking you for Matthew Broderick other than Brandon Lee?
Well, yeah, Brandon was Brandon. We're coming out of what was it? He's in the Army. Oh man, getting Biloxi Blues. We're walking out of Biloxi Blues at a theater. Remember theaters? And Brandon starts going apeshit, pretending I'm Matthew Broderick, going, "Oh, I love your work, man. Can I get your autograph?" And
oh, no.
yeah. And some guys like, "Hey, man, leave him alone." He got all defensive of me.
Was it Christopher Walken? Because he was in the movie too, wasn't he?
Yeah. So yeah, he kind of made people believe I was, and I kind of went with it.
What a
Rick,
story!
As a fan of Brad, I'd like to know, what was your favorite part of the book?
My favorite part of the book. Wow. Well, I loved it all, of course.
Thank you.
But I was particularly interested in. This is weird to say, but I kind of wish that you'd talked a little bit more about your experience on Family Ties.
Okay.
Because that show was my jam. And I remember you being on there. You were Mallory's boyfriend for an episode or two, correct?
Or was
it just one episode?
Yeah, they brought me on as a blind date, I think. Michael J. Fox. Man, that was kind of a magical time. I was working a lot in Hollywood, and it was just the bomb sitcom to be on at the time, and it was just nothing but good vibes. And it's a sitcom like that. It's so laid out, and so the formula is set, and you don't have to be funny. The people are invested in these characters, where they just walk on the set and people start laughing. It's like you watch later episodes of Friends. They don't have to do anything. They literally just walk on the set and people start laughing. Why?
Yeah.
Because they're invested and they know the characters, and everything they do reminds them of every other episode they were on. And so it was that kind of gravy train. And I don't remember a lot of interaction with Mallory. What's her Justine, but Michael was great. Yep. Michael was full on. He was doing Back to the Future at the time. He was shooting that at night and working Family Ties during the day. So he was burning the candle at both ends. But just a great guy. You couldn't hold it against him because he was just a party. That's all. And so to be on a network show that was, just. It's hard to get that kind of ratings anymore because of all the different channels, but it was at a time where it was pretty much...
It's a different world.
Yeah, it was pretty much appointment television, for the better or worse. And so it was, a great thing to experience. I wouldn't want to live on that ship, but it's great to take that cruise once in a while.
Oh, I'm
Bill,
sure.
I think a lot of the readers like myself really appreciate that you opened up about like the death of Carol's father and how y'all ended up moving to LA and such. Was
Yeah,
Carol okay with that?
Carol,
Kind of put it all out
I
there.
hope so. She edited the book, but soon after we moved back to LA from New Mexico, I was there for a few years. We ended up in Northern California taking care of her sick father, and that was about a year and a half. And so ever since, we've been back for a good 18 years, 19 years, and we love it. We're in glorious Eagle Rock, California, and are very, very fortunate.
In the house you reference, in fact, to quote Norman Rockwell type house, what is that the one you're still living in?
Yeah, it's a little craftsman cottage house in a very historic section of Los Angeles. And so it's 102 years old.
It is Norman Rockwell-ish. I would agree with you on that.
It's a Rockwell. I'm not sure who Norman Rockwell is, but I'm sure he's a great artist too. You know, you never know.
He sells Walmart art.
That's right.
That's
stuff. Right. We saw him at the Walmart Museum in Bentonville, which we were at. Like, what was it last year? Brandon Shaw.
Yeah, it was
ended up,
April.
Yeah, we ended up in Bentonville.
No, it's actually wrong trip. October of last year.
And it's the hometown.
That was like
It's the hometown of Walmart, and so they had me out there to do a promo film for Braden Bringhurst. But it is, for the people who don't know, the mountain biking capital of the world. Even though there's no mountains in Bentonville, the Walmart family has poured so much money into mountain bikes and mountain bike trails around the city. I think the figure I heard was like $65 million in trails and different ramps and elements. And it's Disneyland for bike fans. So go.
Yeah, well, that was their goal when they put all that money into Bentonville. They decided that they wanted to be the destination, the bicycle capital of the world. And we're talking like hundreds of miles of bike trails. Yeah,
it's really spectacular.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was very awesome.
You can't believe your eyes. So they've made it a destination spot and a really good place for their employees to thrive, because it's Northeast Arkansas. So they wanted to keep their execs close to home instead of bolting as soon as they finish their tenure, or their education.
So going back to Brandon Lee on chapter 10, I believe it was, you mentioned that he liked to get attention, even if it was negative. So I know he's a jokester, prankster, but when you say negative, like what would he do that would just cross the line so bad?
Well,
that would,
he had a big Bart Simpson streak in him. And one thing comes to mind. We did a play called Full Fed Beast, and it was a prison drama, and John Lee Hancock wrote it and directed it. And I asked him recently, I'm like, did you know the impact this thing would have on stage when Brandon had to take a leak on stage? It was just part of the play. It's 4 guys sitting around in a prison cell for an hour, and one of them has to take a leak. Well, this is a common thing in a prison cell. I had never seen it on stage. And it was a small theater in the round, and Brandon he didn't pee really in this toilet. He had a water bag taped to his leg and would pull out a hose. And when he just walked over talking, when he was taking that leak on stage, you could have heard a pin drop. I'm telling you, it was among the most dramatic things I'd ever been a part on stage. It was just unexpected, and it's a 23-year-old Brandon Lee whooping his schlong out, or so you think. So it was pretty dramatic. So I tell you that to tell you this. We're out on the sidewalk getting ready to do this performance. He's in his prison garb, and he's got his water bag all prepared, and we're standing there talking to a couple of actresses, Bess Myers, one of them, and I forget who else. And Brandon's like, I got to take a leak. And I know exactly where he's going with this. So he turns around, takes that hose out, and starts opening it up on the sidewalk like he's peeing on the sidewalk like a racehorse. And I'm like, I go with it. I'm like, oh, Brandon, that's terrible. You should be ashamed of yourself. Stop that. Cut it out, Brandon. He's like, oh. He puts it back in his pants. He's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Then he gets down on all fours and starts lapping it up with his tongue off the sidewalk on the Santa Monica Boulevard. I mean, no more
Oh my
disgusting
God.
thing. It would have been better had it been actual urine because it might have sanitized that sidewalk. Anyway, that's a Brandon story, and I've got 200 more. He was just that kind of a guy. He was on fire.
Well, I have to say that part of the book was very touching, and your love for Brandon was very evident in your sentiments. What was it like to have someone like Brandon in your life, and then to not have him? Because he was such a dynamo.
Yeah,
he was
he
just this vibrant character.
He was a meteor, and he had an aura about him, and talked about it, that he wouldn't be around for very long. And of course, you never want to think about it or accept it of somebody who's so vital and so young. And so, I couldn't imagine my life without him. And when it actually happened, it was beyond devastating. So I ended up in New Mexico for 4 or 5 years, kind of healing up and living kind of a very quiet life in a spiritual community. And I ended up doing acting work in Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And I wound up doing a show called Lazarus Man with Robert Urich. I think it was a TNT show. And I get the call sheet, and Michael Massey is on the same show. He's the guy who actually pulled the trigger on Brandon, albeit accidentally. But so I talked to him at the time. I figured this was meant to be. If we're on the same film set in New Mexico, I might as well confront my demon, so to speak. And we kind of broke bread over lunch and made whatever kind of amends we could as grown men. And so New Mexico was very much a part of my healing process. And once I did, I found myself starving and ready to come back to Los Angeles. And so now here I am. And last year, this rad thing got re-released, and it's just taken off. Of course, we were supposed to go to South by Southwest and do some screenings with the Alamo Draft House. I mean, Brandon can tell you there's just so many things that got scuttled because of COVID that will be rescheduled, frankly, I'm pretty sure. And but people being locked in their homes, that created an even bigger buzz for the movie, I think. And now it's jumped the fence from being a cult favorite to a mainstream movie. You see it on it was on Showtime, and it's a huge hit on iTunes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it ranked number 1 on iTunes for a spell there, didn't it, over last summer?
I think it debuted at number 7 for top movies, but if you go to iTunes top ranked movies, and I do about every 5 minutes, you go to you can do different categories like sports or independent or classics, and it's just always crushing it. And the films that it's often, doing above, it's just some of the all-time classic movies of all time. So it's really nice and humbling and satisfying to know that it's getting a global audience even more so now.
Bill, I'd like to address the picture part of your book. Who took the picture of you in the hotel room where he says, "Watching the parade go by without me"? Who took that picture of you?
Well, that would be my acting coach, Brian O'Byrne. So, yeah, I had a place on Bronson and Sunset, which is kind of an iconic corner. You see it a lot in TVs and movies, but that's where they let the stars out and into their cars for the Hollywood Christmas parade. So we're watching it literally from my balcony, and you can see the parade car with Rad and the banner and writers from the movie and stars of the movie, except for the star of the movie, doing the Hollywood parade right outside my window. So I'm looking out the window, and Brian takes a Polaroid of the exact moment my heart breaks. You can see it. It's right there in the picture.
You can see it on your face, plain as day.
Right there, man. The picture.
It's remarkable.
1,000 words.
You also have a farmer's tan.
I've always had a farmer's tan, dude. It's the look. Yeah. This boy don't take
Very
his
much
shirt out.
shown in the picture.
Yeah, I don't take my shirt off outside.
But what led to you not being in the parade?
Oh, I guess it would be blowing off.
What were the circumstances behind that?
Stupidity.
Yeah.
So I would blame it on. So, like I said earlier, I was on tour with the guys and having too much fun, and made an excuse when they were taking me to the airport to the premiere. I'm like, I'm sick, and it was just a stupid day in my life. I regret it, and yeah, so I don't think they were pleased with that, the producers. And so when it was time to actually promote the film on TV, it's like you can go on YouTube and see writers promoting Rad on Merv Griffin. Well, where was I? Or where was I in the Hollywood parade? So it's like I kind of got the message. But I don't think me not being at the premiere had any consequence one way or the other. I just think I was kind of uninvited to the party after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bill, I want to address a picture of you and I believe it was Skippy from Family Ties, Mark Price.
Okay.
Are you aware of the problems he had as an adult where I think he was like missing for a while?
No,
I'm not joking. I'm being serious.
I'm sure you are.
Do you stay in touch with Mark Price?
I do not. And it was what I was saying.
Was his name Skippy?
That was Skippy. Yeah.
Skippy. Nice guy. But what I was saying earlier,
I've never heard that
train, dude, it's fun to be on, but it will tear you a new a-hole. It's really dangerous.
Okay, we're gonna
the pitfalls.
move on to the
pitfalls are
next
many, and not the least of being you can become insufferable, right?
Bill, the next person I have,
much like Brandon, yes.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Next topic. We have a picture. We have a picture of on the set of Born on the 4th of July. Very muscled up guys. They all have their shirts off, but you have a shirt on. Could you talk about that, please?
I was working on my
You have a tank
farmer's
top
tan.
on.
Yeah. Keeping it real with the farmer's tan, dude. Yeah. And you don't want to see my pecs. It would make you cry.
All right. Let's see what else we got here. A lot of pictures in this book. Rick, you anything to add to this on the pictures?
Did you want to ask about Tom Cruise? I mean, here's a guy you might want to hear about. I don't know. Maybe.
Nope.
No. Anyway.
Brandon, not interested.
Yep.
No, I what a production we have here. Huh?
Yep.
Living large at Farm Aid. That was awesome. All right, let's talk about this picture about our American Indian wedding, you and Carol.
Yeah. So Carol and I got wed in '97. We married twice, actually. We had an elopement in Vegas, which, by the way, nobody cares if you run off to get Vegas married when you're an adult. It's just like, anyway. And then the next year we had a Native American ceremony on our land in New Mexico. And it was officiated by a Native American medicine singer and the spiritual leader of the Taos Pueblo. Pete Concha was there, who was probably in his late 90s at the time, lived into his hundreds. So anybody and everybody who was there remembers it like it was yesterday. It was just a spectacularly unforgettable ceremony like you've never seen. Yeah.
All right, hold on. I got one more though. This is a very I don't know if people catch this or not. Here's the mystery. How are you holding a picture of your book in the book?
That's crazy, right?
Magic.
Yeah.
It is crazy. You have a picture of your book in the book with Martin and Eddie.
Yeah, they're reading the book.
Special effects?
Yeah. Well, it's a special effect.
It's,
The effect is they're reading the book. They don't read, dude. It's not their thing. So, that
Has anyone else asked you about that?
Yeah. And my mistake was writing a book for mostly BMXers. I should have wrote a coloring book, which I should do a version of this in a coloring book.
Yeah, because Brandon would be able to follow along a little bit better.
That's right.
With the book.
And he can color outside the lines. That's fine. Whatever.
You'll get there. So one question I had was when you hooked up. I forgive me, I can't remember his name. The fellow that was involved with Brandon's passing,
Michael Massey.
Yeah. Were either of you aware before being part of that project that you were going to be working together? And was that ever addressed like in a way that, okay, well, this is the universe telling us that we both need to heal and kind of move on from this? Or did it ever cross your mind in that way?
That's the only thing I thought about.
Yeah.
I left Los Angeles to
But did it come up in conversation?
Not with him. It didn't have to. I mean, it's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And the name of the show was Lazarus Man, for one thing, which kind of had a call back to The Crow. And and the first time I saw Michael, he was twirling a gun. And here's the other thing. On the call sheet was an actor named Max Gale, who played the Polish cop on Barney Miller. If you remember that old series. Lovely actor. And
oh my God. Yeah.
Okay. So he was a friend of
Wojo.
Okay, very good. He was a friend of Lou's, and the first Indian sweat lodge ceremony that I ever did was on Max Gale's property in Malibu. And it was a very memorable experience. And so I ended up in New Mexico doing these Indian sweat lodges basically every week. It's their form of religion, their form of church, I should say. And so I get the call sheet and I see his name. And I'm like, well, gosh, I get to see Max again. I hadn't seen him since the sweat lodge. And it had such an impact on my life, like life-changing impact. And then who's the next guest star? Michael Massey. I don't recognize that name. And I didn't have his name memorized. And my body kind of started shaking before I realized who it was. You know, it's like my body was reacting before my brain clicked in. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh, okay, I get it. So he was on the docket to be working the next afternoon. I was to be the next morning, and I was to work in the afternoon. So I made sure I got there to see him before he wrapped. And like I said, my first view of him was him twirling a gun and dropping it, like not doing it very well. So I'm like, he still hadn't learned how to handle a weapon. And I went up and introduced myself and told him I was Brandon Lee's best friend. And, you know, he apologized, I guess, in a kind of a clumsy way. And we ended up having lunch together. And, you know, he was a shattered man. He died a couple of years ago. And I don't think you get over something like that, you know, and he certainly hadn't at the time. And I think it probably just took him out early, you know.
Bill, you wrote about the Dachshund that Brandon had given you prior to his death.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that car a little bit? You did address the book, of course.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It's not a well-known car. It's the Datsun 1600. There was a 1600 in the 2000, and it was the predecessor to the 240Z, pretty famous Datsun car of the 70s. And it was a Japanese import, obviously, and the first version of it, they were obsessed by My Fair Lady. So they called it the Fair Lady, which is not a great name for a sports car, if you think about it, the Fair Lady. So they ditched that pretty quickly. And Brandon gave me that Datsun 1600, and I had it restored after he passed. And I drove that for quite some time. And now some fan
I believe it was a convertible, correct?
Little removable hardtop, yeah.
Okay. And what happened to that car?
I sold it to get my first powered parachute, which is my kind of passion. I hope to be doing that tomorrow. I've got a little airplane I fly around for no good reason.
Well, talk about that a little bit. It's an airplane, but it's also was it like a hang glider, a powered hang glider? Not a hang glider.
It's similar. The engine is probably similar. They use the same engine in a lot of instances, but instead of like a fabric rigid wing, the wing on mine is a square parachute, kind of like what you see skydivers use, except it's got thrust behind it with a motor. So now that gives it lift. So you leave the ground with an inflated parachute, and if God forbid the engine goes out, or if you cut the engine for fun, you can just glide around and land under no power, no problem. It's really not an issue. So I've been doing that about 2 years now, and man, it's so much fun, and it forces you to be in the moment. Brandon's been up with me. He was begging to come down, and it kind of
it's pretty scary at first.
It is for me. Even after all these years, I'm like, am I doing this? I'm going to be up in the air with a 1,000-pound machine being held up by a bunch of strings. Okay, here we go. So if you can do that regularly, you can face your fears once you're on the ground much more, easily, I think.
Wow.
Bill,
Do or die.
toward the back of the book, you mentioned quite a bit about Matt Hoffman. Can you talk to us a little bit more about Matt? Have you had interaction with Matt? And if so, what was said between the two of you?
Yeah, many times. I wouldn't call him a friend, but we know each other. And he is the supreme being probably in BMX. Anybody who knows his background or knows him understands that he works at a different level than not just BMXers, but most human beings. And even in the stunt world, even amongst his peers, he's hailed as a champion, and has broke the record for the highest BMX ramp. Right? How high did he get on that, Brandon? You'd know more than I.
I can't even. 26. Well, was a ramp 26 feet tall, or he went 26 feet above it? I don't know.
Yeah, so we're talking 50, 60 feet in the air, and you get a little, not even a stiff wind, a little wind to blow you off course and your hamburger. In fact, he has died and come back.
If you recall, we saw him at Woodward, and we got to be on the ramp when he actually launched above us, and the next day posted the picture from his helmet cam of us on top of the ramp at Woodward.
Last time I saw him was at Woodward.
About 3 years ago.
Last time I saw him was at Woodward at an old school event. I walk out to the parking lot, and he's standing there just joking with some friends, smile on his face. I look down, and his ankle is the size of a cantaloupe. He just sprained the crap out of it, and has no effect on him whatsoever. I'm like, Matt, you need me to run you to the ER? I'm like, nah, get there, whatever. Just completely unconcerned, where I was crying looking at it. I mean, a bad sprain is just incredibly painful. You'd much rather break your ankle than sprain it badly. So, yeah, I don't think he feels pain like humans. I haven't tried actually.
Those guys are made of steel.
Oh, if you listen to the YouTube thing about his knee surgery that he did in a motel room with a drill, that's amazing.
You'll cry.
That's crazy.
And long ago, he stopped going to the ER for simple just rips. He just stitches himself up with needle and thread with no anesthetic. I mean, so who does that, dude? He ain't like us. And so that's kind of the fun part about being in this world, is you meet people that just aren't like you at all, and you go, why are you doing that? Why are you trying to do a quadruple backflip on a bike? Why would you do that? Yeah. There's not enough money involved. No matter how much they're getting paid, they're putting their life on the line for the goof. And to me, God bless you, buddy. As long as you're not, endangering other lives like street racing or something like that, go get your freak on. Do your thing, man. Do what makes you.
Well, that's why I was happy to hear the nod to Jose Yanez in the book about, he was the one who set the tone and paved the way for these guys doing what they do with quadruple backflips and all that. So
he did the first backflip on a motorcycle and BMX bike. So he's the man. As soon as Roger Bannister breaks the 4-minute mile, then it becomes doable, and everybody does it who's so devoted. But you can't forget the first guy who did that. He's the first guy who did that. So it's an honor to know the guy. And in many ways, he kind of made that movie with that backflip, man. It was just such a jaw-dropping thing that Hal wove into the narrative, and it kind of is the capstone of the race, and says so much about Cru. And man, it's great. So there's a lot to explore there. I don't.
Yeah, I mean the backflip is essentially the backbone of the story. I mean, it follows you all the way through all three acts of the film. It's like you're trying to do it, you know, in the very beginning, and it's just, you know, nobody was doing that back then.
Yeah, it's
until he did it.
In the world, it's called a recall, and it's just it was placed perfectly. And Hogan, eat your heart out. I mean,
yes.
It's just such an iconic line and point in the movie. And at the time to watch it, it was like I say in the book, it was like watching the moon landing. People weren't doing this before that, you know, and it really felt like he was risking his neck, and he frankly was, you know. So let's just hats off to Jose, that's for sure.
It was awesome when Dylan Stark, the winner of the actual only winner of Hell Track that did the full race laps, when he did the backflip. I mean, a backflip's so common nowadays, but when he did that backflip at the 2018 Hell Track, that was amazing, man. He split these two riders right down the middle, and he landed. It was freaking awesome. So I'm so happy that he won after pulling off that move he did. And then he transferred from the step-up thing over to the damn starting ramp. So even in 2018, that backflip was amazing. Bill, you've got 21 chapters in this book. Talk to me about how long it took to write this book. How many months, years? How long was it from start to finish?
Probably about 6 months. And then for the second edition, I put another 6-8 weeks of work into it. These things don't come easy. And it got picked up by an actual New York publisher, and that's how the hardback is now available. So I'm really pleased. People really seem to enjoy it, and I'm glad people like Rick, who can read, had taken the time. So thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's what I like the most about the book is that it shows you, because obviously we all Rad fans, we know you as Cru. So it showed you as a human being, you know, with emotion and history, and it was very refreshing. I enjoyed it.
Very cool. Well,
Bill, if you were to rewrite that book, if you were to rewrite this book in 2022, or let's say 2021, what would you be adding to that book at this time that's not in there now?
Oh man, there's a lot going on, and a lot going on I can't talk about, but I can tell you there's a bicycle about to be released that people are going to freak out over. I'm working on a documentary that's almost wrapped filming, and 2 or 3 feature films that are in the works right now. So it's a good time to be Cru Jones, and it's an exciting time to see the fans regrouping, and now that COVID is hopefully winding down, we can start planning more events in the future.
Absolutely.
We've got a lot to look forward to, that's for sure.
Right?
Well, I'll tell you what,
sure.
Bill, it's been a pleasure having you on this episode, going over my rad career. Let's tell them where to get this book again.
Yeah, like I said, you can go to barnesandnoble.com and even your local bookstore, or you can go to myradcareer.com and get yourself an autographed copy, and it will be autographed by me.
Fantastic.
Awesome. I've got one with Jose Yanez and Eddie and Martin and all sorts of people.
Have you learned it
yourself, of course, Bill?
Have you learned
it? Have I learned it? Tonight I actually did. As much as I don't know how many hours you and I have spent together on the road and driving, man. There's a few things I learned tonight in this book. I enjoyed it. It's pleasurable.
All right. Well, read the rest.
What I learned is there's a picture of you holding the book in the book.
That's very Twilight Zone-y.
Thought that was pretty cool. And
that's CGI.
Cool, man. Well, this has been fun, man. I love learning little facts about Mr. Bill behind the scenes.
Thanks, Rick.
Rick, what do you think?
Yeah, my pleasure. We got to do this again soon. It's been too long since we've chatted, and hopefully once things start picking up, we can have more things to talk about regarding the future.
Right on.
Yeah, I will put a little teaser out there. I know there's something that me and Bill can talk about hopefully really soon, and we'll put it out there on Facebook. We'll hold that for the next podcast. When we release, I think we should have that released with a podcast, let people tune in and listen to know what I'm talking about. But it's pretty big, wouldn't you say, Bill?
Dude, there's so much stuff happening. Man, I can't handle it. I'm so excited.
Cool. All right, guys, man, I've enjoyed being part of this. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Rick.
Yo.
Appreciate you tagging along, Bill.
Thanks.
We will talk soon, fellas.
Right on.
Stay rad.
Thanks for checking out The Real 33. Be sure to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on Facebook at Real 33 Podcast.